with them?
Sure. So just quick background for folks who weren't part of Parkside Heritage before and the other meetings. San Francisco Heritage is a 50-year-old nonprofit that has a mission to preserve and enhance San Francisco's unique architectural and cultural identity. That often is thought of as us trying to save old buildings or important historic structures, but we also work on recognizing and supporting legacy businesses in the city and cultural districts and cultural communities. So Carrie Young is our communications and programs manager, and I'm the vice president of advocacy and programs at Heritage. We came up with a program a couple of years ago called Heritage in the Neighborhoods. And the whole goal of it is that we would bring all of Heritage's resources and mainly Carrie and I's time to neighborhoods that we felt were underrepresented in the fields of preservation and in like protecting the things that we all feel are special in San Francisco. So as part of that, we would do a month-long focus on that neighborhood, try to show our general audience and the whole public of the city what's special about it, meet with people who live in the neighborhood, people who care about it, and help them basically elevate what they think is important and should be preserved in their neighborhoods. So the Parkside was one of our neighborhoods we did in, I want to say July 2020, and it was done mostly virtually because of the pandemic. But the group that formed out of that is this one, which is Parkside Heritage. And we think of these as independent sort of affinity groups to San Francisco Heritage. It's not Heritage running this, it's the neighbors, it's the communities that care about the neighborhood. And we're just trying to continue to support their work. So the first project that this group decided to take on was the city landmarking of the Trocadero Clubhouse, which is in Stern Grove and is an old roadhouse that was built in the 1890s. So the group basically asked the supervisor of District 4 to nominate this, to initiate the landmarking nomination, which he did. Supervisor Gordon Marr brought it forward. It has gone through the Historic Preservation Commission, where it was enthusiastically endorsed. And now it stands back at the Board of Supervisors, where Supervisor Marr has introduced the ordinance to make it a city landmark. And it has to be heard now at the Land Use and Transportation Committee. We hope in the next week we'll hear when the date will actually be, when it'll be heard at the Land Use and Transportation Committee. That will likely be the last time the public can call in and weigh in and give its support, hopefully, for this landmarking before it goes to the full Board of Supervisors to approve the ordinance. So that's just a little background. And like I said, Carrie and I are just part of this group at this point. We're very happy that Natalie and Nicole and Evan and other folks in the Parkside or who care about the Parkside deeply are bringing this forward, and we're happy to support whatever work Parkside Heritage wants to do.
Woody, do you have any idea when they plan on having that land use committee meeting?
I don't. I'm hoping it's soon. Like I said, Supervisor Marr, I don't know if any of his aides are on this call or whatever, but one of them was going to get back to us this week to give us an idea. It's kind of up to the chair of that committee when to schedule it, but it is waiting to be scheduled. And I'm going to see, the chair is actually Supervisor Melgar, who I'm going to see tomorrow. So maybe I'll try to put a bug in her ear and see if she can give me some hint. So
that'd be great. If you get some information, let me know and I'll send it out to everybody. Great. Thank you.
Jeff, here we go. I'm actually sitting in for Supervisor Marr on his request and exchanged some information from him today. What we're waiting for, as you said, Woody, is we're waiting for final input from Supervisor Melgar's office tomorrow. They think that it looks like the first date that it can be heard. Let me just look at this again to make sure I'm telling you the truth. I think it was March 14th. Give me a second, I'm just not sure.
Great.
March 14th, and
March
we're expecting
14th.
to hear back from Supervisor Melgar tomorrow. She's the chair of that committee, the LUT committee.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
All right, so We have one of our members, Eileen Boken, has been working diligently on the historic preservation of the Caravel Police Station and also the Parkside Library. And I would like her to give an update, if you will, please, Eileen.
Hi, thank you. For those who are on the call for the first time, the Parkside Library was built in 1951. It's in Appleton and Wolford. It's a whole series that they built here in the city. There was a library bond in the early 2000s, and this was one of them. So between 2002 and 2008, a lot of libraries were being rehabbed. It's about the time that the Parkside Library was being rehabbed that a group of Appleton and Wolford libraries came before the Historic Preservation Commission. It was they were already vetted through the planning department, and Parkside Library was on that list. But since it was under renovation, that they thought that might cause some issues, so it got pulled from the agenda at the last minute, on the understanding that once the rehabilitation had been completed, that it would come back before the Historic Preservation Commission. That never happened, so it's been over 10 years. It's been languishing. So the idea is, well, first of all, just to get as a side note, I testified, excuse me, I testified at the December 1st meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission that this is supposed to be coming back in the spring. And the reason I did that during general public comment is because the planning department sends staff to the Historic Preservation Commission. There is a planner, a historic preservation planner, Elizabeth Gordon-Jonkier. She was there to hear the fact that I'm kind of nudging them. First of all, I'm bringing this to the HPC attention, and I'm also kind of nudging the staff that are there. The other person there was, his name is Aaron Starr. He is the legislative person for the planning department. He covers both the Board of Supervisors and the Historic Preservation Commission. He was there as well, so they both got a nudge, a very public nudge. Woody, is there anything else you want to fill in on the Parkside Library?
No, I agree with you, Eileen. It's been sitting there for a long time on the work program of the planning department to bring forward as a landmark. Another one that's about the same length of time and is in the Parkside, well, maybe adjacent to the Parkside, the Mother's Building at the San Francisco Zoo. And that is what we're going to tour tomorrow with the supervisor, Melgar. And both those have sat on the work program for at least 10 years. So I do think that Eileen's bringing this up and other people bringing this up and pushing to have this advanced would be nothing but helpful.
Okay, so the second issue is the Caravel Station. This is coming up because, first of all, the voters in 2020 voted for what's called an ESER bond, which stands for Earthquake Safety and Emergency Response. And this is upgrading police stations, fire stations, other infrastructure to withstand earthquakes. So because of the bond, first of all, Caravel covers the largest geographic area in the city. It is a very important police station functionally from a law enforcement issue, not just from a historic issue. So based on my belief that the Caravel Station was under the work program for this ESER 2020 bond, I started inviting the ESER program to attend Parkside Heritage. The ESER people are under the Department of Public Works, and I kept inviting them, and they kept saying, "Well, delay, you know, we'll come next month or the month after." Then I get an email saying, "Well, you know, we've decided that the Caravel Station is not within the scope of our work plan for the 2020 bond." which kind of surprised me. Now, the thing is, other sources are saying that it is still on the agenda. So I'm getting conflicting information. So at the January 5th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, I just said, okay, during general public comment, it's possibly coming up soon, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, again, getting it on not only the commission's radar, but also planning staff radar. Now, is there anyone on the call from Supervisor Marr's office?
Yes, Eileen, Jeff Rigo, I am on.
Oh, hi, Jeff. Great. Okay, so this is something Charles Segueras, who I do know from the Capital Planning Committee meetings, is, or at least was in charge of this. And after a number of delays about saying, will you come to Parkside Heritage, he drops the bomb saying, well, no, this Caravel Station is not really on the list. And I am looking at other stations that, other sources, excuse me, that say it is. And if someone from the Supervisor Marr's office could kind of get to the bottom of this, I would think, like I said, it's such a geographically large area that this would have been on the list. And so we're getting conflicting information. So if the supervisor's office could kind of figure out yes or no. And if not, then or if there's still a gray area that maybe we could advocate for it. But it is on the radar for the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning Department staff. This would be a seismic retrofit as opposed to a 1996 retrofit that added functionality to the building and some sculptures, but this is the part of it is the facade, the historic facade, but also is part of it is the community room, which is a very important asset in the neighborhood. We have very little community meeting space in District 4. So Woody, is there something you would like to add? It's about Martin Rist as the architect.
Yeah, just to give some background for folks who weren't in our previous meetings, both the Parkside Library and the Caravel Police Station were identified by Parkside Heritage as good candidates for possible landmarking in the Parkside. So that's why Eileen's been doing a good job of keeping track of this. And I think our concern with the seismic retrofitting of the Caravel Police Station is that the historic fabric of the building, which was designed by a master architect, Martin Rist, did be taken into account and respected, if not somehow more permanently designated a landmark or something to keep it for the future. So that's all.
Well, that's the idea, is that in the process of doing the seismic retrofit, it would be done in a way that maintains the historic character of the building, and that also in the process, so it would be a dual process. Besides the seismic retrofit, then it would go through the historic preservation nomination at the same time. So to try and do two at the same time. So that was the original plan. And hopefully we can get that, the easiest candidates are the ones that are publicly owned. So to try and do, that's why the Trocadero was done, because it's on city property. It's the privately owned buildings on private property. In the past, Sunset Parkside Education and Action Committee, SPEAK, has done 3 ones, which one is the site on Ortega, which is now the Lycée Francais. Down the street from that is what used to be the Shriners Hospital. And also on the Great Highway at 1984 Great Highway was the beach cottage of Dennis Sullivan, the fire chief who died in the 1906 earthquake. It has very nice architecture. And so those were our 3 projects. And all those buildings, we believe that they were all privately owned, and it presents a lot of challenges if something is is in private hands, because especially now there is a lot of pressure for development here in the neighborhood. And so now is the time, anything that might be threatened, especially a privately owned building, like Edgewood or Pinehurst Lodge, I think we need to begin to move on it, because these developers can offer huge amounts of money to nonprofits. Well, we only need part of we'll put up a few high rises at Edgewood and you can just keep the rest. So it's possibly a very important moment in time to really move on some of these. Also, then with the Sunset Forward, the planning department specifically called out institutional uses, although they didn't call out Edgewood and Pinehurst Lodge by name. Judged on the person who said it, I'm pretty sure those were part of what his thoughts were, and so those already might be. Oh, and Jeff, if Jeff Rigo, do they have a list of those sites that they have come up with at Sunset Forward, specific sites, and particularly institutional uses, and if Edgewood and Pinehurst Lodges are on that list? So that's another ask that we have of the supervisor's office. So that's kind of the end of my spiel.
I will take that back to the office. I don't have an answer for that, but
I will go back to Supervisor Mar with your question.
I have a question,
Great.
Eileen. So you said this was a bond that went into effect in 2020. Is that correct?
It was on the 2020 ballot,
Okay.
and the voters, this is a general obligation bond that the voters passed in 2020.
So were
And
there?
the name of the bond,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Was it to upgrade all of the police stations, or were they specific as to which stations would be upgraded?
Well, this is the, first of all, this is the third Easter bond. There was one in 2010, what was it, 2014 or 2016. So some of them in the past have targeted specific projects. However, lately, the bonds are saying, well, we were not able to complete the environmental review in time to name specific projects. So basically, just give us a blank check. So this is a blank check.
I see, because, we're taxpayers too. So I think that the places that service our neighborhood should have priority over just as, over other people's police stations as well. So yeah, that's definitely something that Supervisor Mar's office could let us know about. Thank you.
Okay,
Eileen.
great.
So I wanted to just show everybody, because Eileen pointed this out to me, and I had no idea, but apparently the Parkside, according to the planning department, the Parkside neighborhood the boundaries go all the way out to the beach. And I was not aware of that. And this leaves us with a very interesting dilemma, which is, how do we reach the rest of Parkside? So that's what the map in the upper left corner is, and the map in the lower right corner shows the planning district for San Francisco Planning Department as the outer sunset, which makes sense. But that is who we would be dealing with for any type of legislature moving forward. Does anyone, or could anybody get back to me if they have any suggestions on how to reach the people in the western part of Parkside? I'm not aware of any neighborhood associations or anything out that way. So I would really appreciate it.
It does raise some questions because there are some large developments that are going on out there. And I
Yes.
don't know if this group wants to take those on from the Irish Cultural Center area on. So as far as like, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, as far as who to reach out there, I do think there are some interest groups and large property owners that we could definitely contact.
That would be very helpful.
Natalie, can I ask?
Yeah.
What is your goal again for reaching the outer? So you're basically saying your group is more focused on the central portion of it.
Well, it's not that so much.
Sunset or-
I just personally, I was not aware that the Parkside neighborhoods encapsulated the very west part of Parkside. I didn't know that. I had no idea. So Woody's absolutely right. I think that if residents that lived in our neighborhoods realized that their neighborhood extended to the beach, that we might have put more thought process into what was happening with these huge developments that are currently being spoken about to be built.
Well, I can tell you, I do know that there is, I am part of a group called DForward. We're a little bit more political than infrastructure, but we're basically District 4, and we have people that span the Parkside and the Sunset. I know that there's a new group that's forming specifically related to the 2700 Sloat project, which you can imagine is getting lots of attention, not very positive. So, and I don't know if you're aware of it, but if you go to the planning department, they basically post a spreadsheet of all of the neighborhood groups throughout the city. There are hundreds of them.
No, I did not know that.
My group DForward is part of it. If you, if I can send you the link to that. In fact, maybe while somebody else is talking, I'll find it and I'll post it in the chat. But it's very useful. It's got their names, what area they're from, district, contact information, stuff like that.
That would be very helpful because I realize now that we have a much bigger voice than I had originally thought before Eileen pointed this out. So I think that it's important to include our neighbors when we have these discussions. So that said, moving forward, I was very surprised when I saw the renderings of the replacement to the Irish Cultural Center and also the other development site that's going to be taking the place of Sloat Garden Center. And these are huge buildings without much of any change to the infrastructure around it. And it's very concerning. We may be too late in the game to even participate in opposing it. I don't know, but I wanted everybody that's, joining us tonight to see what the plans are, because I was taken back. I had no idea. And I decided to reach out to all of you and conduct this meeting because our David Herzl, the president of the Pine Lake Neighborhood Association, approached Woody about great concern over the development that's happening in our part of the city and the fear of privately owned land and the buildings upon it and what may happen to it with, like Eileen said, the push for development and for housing in the city and in our district, in particular, due to the low density of the area. So yeah, so one of those buildings that Eileen mentioned, I don't know what's coming up next, Nicole.
I skipped ahead a little bit, but
That's okay.
oops, sorry.
That's all right. Edgewood, right?
Well,
Yeah, so-
one question I had, Natalie, maybe for Jeff, it sounds like maybe you could give us an idea of what your group DForward is involved with vis-a-vis some of those developments and how that squares with your with your role at Supervisor Marr's office. And also you mentioned something about a new group forming to tackle, I believe you said the 2700 slope project. So maybe you could give us a little background and what you know about all that.
Okay, I feel like I'm in a bit of a conflict of interest. I want to separate my personal stuff from my association with Supervisor Marr. I've been volunteering for Supervisor Marr since he was elected. I'm a big supporter and working on his re-election campaign right now. Our group kind of started out of some of the momentum that developed with his election. And we've been meeting since then. We meet once a month on the third Sundays. One of the early things we got involved with was opposition to Scott Wiener's SB 50. We were not in favor of blanket upzoning of the entire state to give the entire city away to developers. So we spend a lot of time on land use and housing. I attended the initial meeting that they had for 2700 Slope because, again, I'm personally interested in this stuff. So I got to hear what they were talking about, see what they were planning. Our group is ideologically, we support affordable housing, but we also are antagonistic, or we are not in line with the YIMBY idea that all growth is good. We believe that neighborhood character is actually a good thing, and we think that we can have affordable housing that's actually affordable to people that live and work here, that doesn't have to be ugly and doesn't have to turn the Sunset into the Mission District or Hayes Valley or whatever. So anyhow, 2700 Slope obviously piqued our attention. I spent a lot of time digging around, trying to understand how on earth those 4 parcels on Slope Boulevard ever got to be zoned for 100 feet. There's almost no other, there are like 4 other lots, I think, in the 20th and Irving area that have that height limit. So I really had to dig around. Eileen actually shared a little tidbit that she had found that some planning director in the distant past thought it would be a nice idea if there were high rises along the beach that would be welcoming to tourists arriving to the city, if you can believe it. So anyhow, in the chat, because I'm listed, because our group is listed on the planning department's groups, neighborhood group sites, I recently got an email from, I think his name is Louis Quadra. I posted his email address in the chat. He is acting as kind of the liaison to the community. Trying to, I think, basically, what's the word I want? Beat the opposition at the pass and try to get people to be supportive rather than otherwise. So he sent an email to our group offering to meet with us to talk about it. This other newer group, I don't know if they have a name yet. I have some contact information. If you wanted to, let me just make sure I can, yeah. If you want to put some contact information in the chat, you know, and my personal capacity, I would be happy to send some more information when I get it about this newer group that's forming. They're kind of forming, I think, specifically to be opposed to that building. I think a lot of them are neighbors that live in the immediate area, and they're not particularly thrilled about a 12-story building.
What's Supervisor Marr's position on it?
I don't know that he has a specific position. I think in general, I don't know if you remember, Supervisor Marr was the supervisor that initiated the ordinance that the supervisors passed opposing SB 50. So his position basically is he's supportive of affordable housing, but feels like neighbors' voices need to be heard as well. And again, he also is kind of pretty much in line with me and my group that we're opposed to the city being taken over by speculators and the city being used as a cash cow rather than, they're building houses to make money rather than building houses for people to live in.
Thank you.
Yes, and what a lot of people don't know, and what Heather just mentioned in the chat, is that, and I've discussed this more with some of the people in the group, but what most people don't realize is that these developers are coming in and they're trading airspace in lieu of giving something back to the city, like renovating buildings that attract tourists, or renovating historic buildings in lieu of airspace so that they could build more stories. And normally these developers and the city would be required to have it come in front of the general public to make comment. But because these developers the contracts are signed with these developers that are not within the United States, they do not have to abide by the same rules as developers that are here in the United States. And therefore they don't have to, there's no requirement for them to have public hearings.
No, I want to push back on that. I'm not the super expert on it, but just to give you, like 2700 Sloat, they're relying on a city ordinance called Home SF. That lot, it's zoned for 100 feet. And what they're getting is they're getting an extra 25 feet as a bonus because they're including a certain amount of affordable housing. And it's a whole very complicated thing. They have to, depending upon what ordinance or what California rule or regulation you're operating under, you have to abide by those regardless. What you're referring to more is SB 35, which basically streamlined SECO reviews. And SB 35 is kind of the Home SF thing, but it's the California version of it. It also gives different types of bonuses for height, density, and stuff like that in exchange for a certain amount of affordability. But it doesn't make any difference what country or what state. For example, like 2700 Sloat is trying to feature, I don't know, it's kind of complicated. They tried to feature themselves as a San Francisco company, but they're actually an LLC registered in Reno. And I think it's fairly obvious that they're, the primary goal of almost all of the construction in the city is for making money.
Well, yeah, when I was speaking about it, I was speaking specifically to historic preservation.
So
there is a
Natalie,
difference. I'm sorry.
I just have a suggestion. There's a lot of state bills that kind of Jeff is referring to. Maybe for in a future meeting, we could get a little deeper dive into some of these, because I do think it's important that people know SB 9 and other bills are actually really important to talk about, and what reactions we might have to counter them. But as Jeff says, it's a deep subject. It's a lot of to talk
It is.
about. And I do think I see some people from Edgewood here. So maybe, I don't know if we're going to talk about Edgewood tonight, but I'd be curious how they feel about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. But I just want to say that there's a fine line between discussing developments that affect the surrounding neighborhood and historic preservation that affects the surrounding neighborhood. So we have to be very clear with what line that we're following, and that may be something for a different group with our voices heard versus this group that is primarily surrounding historic preservation in the Parkside neighborhood. That said, yes, so moving forward to, yes, so this is pictures of Edgewood. I don't know if everybody has seen it. It's on Vicente and 30th, and it is also privately owned. I think that we have someone here from Edgewood tonight. Joelle? No? Okay, she had emailed me.
Actually, Joelle was not able to be here. I'm Greg
Oh, hi,
Beggs,
Greg.
and Lynn Delche, our CEO, is also here.
Oh, hi. Glad you guys could make it. So what are your thoughts on the preservation of the building and how it's become a jewel to our neighborhood?
Hi, thanks. I wasn't really prepared to talk about that. I was just prepared to listen to all the good work that you're doing, but
That's
since you
fine.
asked,
Anything
have,
you can add.
yeah, I mean, you know, we have 7 acres of land between 29th and 30th. So it's more than just one building. There are, you know, 7 or 8 buildings on the land that we use, and more and more the buildings are empty for lots of reasons, having to do with the population of kids that we've served over the years, decreasing in our city and county contracts, and so on and so forth. So without going into a long history of our business plan, it's become increasingly difficult to maintain the buildings. They're really old buildings built in the early 1920s, as you know. We think they're very beautiful, but they really need a facelift. They need to be modernized. They're really, really expensive to maintain. If there's a leak or a window breaks or what have you, it's so expensive to fix. And, you know, we basically sustain ourselves with city and county contracts that don't really pay us the cost of doing business in the Bay Area in 2022. So we do have some, you know, significant issues on our hands with regards to the old buildings. There's also historic trees on the land that we cannot take down. We don't want to, but you know, I'm just sharing what I know about the beauty of this land, and there's so much potential there for us. But first we have to be able to afford it. But right now we have to be able to afford just maintaining it, not even beautifying it. So we're in a bit of a bind. And I think you did mention, I think Natalie, it was you, or maybe it was the person who spoke earlier about how hard it is for nonprofits to, you know, constantly say no to opportunities when they come our way. That would really help us, you know. So if selling, you know, the part of the land or leasing part of the land to a developer is an option, you know, we're not saying yes, we're not saying no, but it's tempting to, you know, because it's like either we find a way to keep the doors open, right? Or we just close them. And we don't want to close them, especially now during this pandemic when so many children, you know, with insurance, kids without insurance, so many families are calling, needing help. And we really have to find a way to actually help those families. So I'll just stop there, and I'm happy to have the conversation.
That's exactly what we've been concerned about. Is exactly what you said. And this is also a prime example of what I was just talking about a developer coming in and building, you know, just, this is hypothetical, everybody, this is not necessarily happening, but this is a perfect example of how a developer could come, take half of the land, build a high-rise, you know, condo complex with some of them being below market rate to satisfy that, but also would renovate one of the buildings and either renovate it for touristy type things, which I don't think that would happen in this case because it's not really a tourist area.
No, and we still want, you know, our business there needs to stay there. I mean, we really want to see children there, and we couldn't do that with just anybody living on the land. It would have to be, you know, there'd have to be some congruency with our mission.
Yes.
So, you know, I think a lot about teachers who we really need desperately in San Francisco. We need them at Edgewood. We have a school at Edgewood. I don't know if you know that, but we run a school. Yeah, we have a school.
Could you give any of us a tour?
Yeah. Yep, as soon as we are able to, yeah, we can give you a tour.
I
We
would
can't
love-
give, we can't get, we would probably want to do groups of 3 just because of COVID. We're being really careful. We
course,
do have
yeah.
kids who are there in residential treatment right now. We have kids coming to school there, so we're super cautious about
Of
that.
course, of
But
course.
yeah, we can't even afford to hire teachers. So when I think about housing and I think about our county needs, I don't think about hotels going up there. I think about teacher housing or just something that is really, that we need for the families of San Francisco. But that's just
I
my
guess-
perspective.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I guess my point was that this is a scenario, a hypothetical scenario where they would build housing and they would put some sort of, they would keep the facades, which are considered historic,
Right.
but still put, buildings on top of it or wherever. So that was what I was talking
Oh,
about
I
earlier.
see. Yeah, I
Yeah.
see. Yeah, I've seen that happen too in other
Yes,
neighborhoods, Natalie. You're right.
exactly.
Natalie,
exactly.
if I may jump in for a second,
Sure.
I mean, that's the thing we all fear, right? But what I hear here is this is an opportunity because there's 2 types of historic preservation that I think Parkside Heritage is hoping to assist with. One, which is responsive, which we already talked about with Sloat and trying to help be a collective voice for the community that's keeps an eye on things, but also to be proactive and
Mhm.
identify places like Edgewood and start conversations so that we can all find creative solutions together.
Yes.
And that's what I hear here is finding people who are having the conversation with us about how to keep these historic properties useful in a contemporary way without immediately going to the worst.
Yeah, scenario, right.
Exactly.
I mean,
this is exciting.
it is exciting. And you know what really resonated with me is that Eileen talked about how there's no center in Parkside. The only place we ever have to do any type of recreational anything is at the police department, in a small room at the police department. So, maybe something like that could be worked out. I don't know, but there's a lot of possibilities. So I am glad we're having this conversation.
There has been a suggestion that Edgewood be used by the Youth Guidance Center, which is closing down. And they're going to still need some facility. I don't know if Edgewood's already in talks with them or anything, but I heard that was one of the possibilities, that the Youth Guidance Center could take over part of Edgewood.
Would you like me to respond to that, David? Is that a question or did you want to?
I don't know. I guess it is a question because it's something that I understand was being discussed.
Yes, it has been discussed for several years, actually. And I
Okay.
have been in discussion with the folks up at the Youth Justice Center, the Board of Supervisors, the various commissions and committees that the mayor put together years ago when this legislation was passed by Supervisor Ronan and Supervisor Walton. The hall was supposed to close on December 31st. Edgewood was tapped early on in the process. I attended hours and hours and hours of community meetings, as well as meetings with others, in different areas of the city for this purpose. And really, when push came to shove, when I was asked what does Edgewood need to continue in the conversation, I let them know what we needed, which was a large sum of money to basically hold the property open for further discussion, because there's been lots of interest in Edgewood over the years, as you probably know. And I talk to a lot of people every week about Edgewood and what we're using the land for and what it could be used for. So at that point, I needed the county to make some sort of financial commitment to Edgewood if they wanted me to stay in conversations with them and not move forward with others. There's lots of little private schools that want to rent a building and run their school. There's a lot of different things that people come to Edgewood for. And the county never responded to me. And so I moved on. And Greg and I and the rest of the executive team are working on a strategic plan right now to really think about how best to open up our doors to serve more kids and families with behavioral health and social services, as we've always done. And like I said, we need to modernize the buildings, but first we need to be able to afford that. But yeah, David, that's the sort of short answer to the very long process that I've been in. I'm sure this conversation with the county's not over because guess what? They don't have a place. But honestly, for almost 2.5 years, I was in a dialogue, and it just was stunning to me that I never really got an answer after being asked the question and after being asked to sit at the table. So that didn't leave a very good feeling for me or my team.
Lynn, this is Woody. And thank you for what you guys do. I lived at 30th Avenue across from your driveway for many years, and I'm very familiar with Edgewood. I just want to say, you talk about maintenance a lot, and since this is a historic preservation focused group, I just wonder if you explored, like, if there were actual designations for your historic buildings, not maybe your whole campus. There is a state historic building code that could help maybe in some way with maintenance. And I'm not sure about the organization. I mean, you're a nonprofit, I guess. And so I don't know how helpful it would be, but all I'm saying is there might be incentives that if there were historic designations of part of your property or certain buildings, that it could help maybe alleviate some of the costs of maintenance that you've got. And I guess the other thing is, there are lots of successful adaptation projects across the world of using historic buildings on campuses and incorporating new uses that are complementary. So I don't want to make you think that, we're against anything happening on that campus. At least I personally am not, but I'm most concerned about sort of the setting, the way it impacts the rest of the neighborhood and Stern Grove right next to it. And of course, the historic buildings that you do own. So those are I think the sort of concerns that are revolving around most of the neighborhood with Edgewood. I don't think we're all that worried about, maybe we are worried about 17-story buildings, but more, how do we protect the historic landscape and make new uses that are compatible with it? So.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of both about the development of high rises or whatever, but I do know that that countries around the world do exactly what Woody said, and they've been doing it for a very long time, where they've taken historic buildings and made, created other uses for it, as opposed to just tearing them down like our country has so often. So
yeah, nobody wants to tear the buildings at Edgewood.
No,
nobody at Edgewood at least wants to tear the buildings at Edgewood down.
None of us want it to go away.
Yeah, and Woody, we are looking into the historic, the different kinds of designations that we could have for our buildings to look at maintenance. I think, Greg, you are looking into that, right?
Yeah, we've discussed it for a number of years. We're not that knowledgeable in it. So if we could reach out to you for any recommendations, we'd love to know what some good sources for that would be.
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe.
Is that a huge question? Like, I'm just curious, how many, are there multiple designations of historicity, and are there any financial benefits or any financial perks associated with it?
There are. I think the question is, for a nonprofit, it may not be as useful as if you were some sort of private developer, for example, where they get pretty large tax breaks, is essentially the main incentive. So we'd have to kind of look into it, but I think it's worth the look to see. There's a state historic tax credit that's supposed to be. It's been passed. It's been signed, but it hasn't been, the mechanisms have not been created yet that everybody's waiting for, that helps with the adaptation of historic buildings. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you're right, Woody. I think it would be a good idea to try to do some research on the legislature that's passed for things like that and discuss it with the group.
I'll reach out for sure.
That's
and the good news is that your organization's history is very well documented. So it's not like you have to do a lot of legwork. The finding aid alone that Natalie sent out has a robust and sparkling history about all of your many iterations. So, but if you need any extra help, please feel free to reach out to Western Neighborhoods Project. We're happy to help you guys get through this process too.
Nicole, that's really kind. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
I'm glad that we crossed paths tonight. And speaking of that, on the agenda, as Nicole mentioned, I just put a couple links in case anybody wanted to know about the history of the buildings. So that said, can we please move to the Pinehurst? This is another beauty in our neighborhood. I don't know if you all are familiar with it because it's kind of its own little area. But it's like right across the street from a portion of Edgewood. And I believe it's owned by the Salvation Army. Is that correct, Woody? Yeah. And I believe at some point, I don't know if it was Woody or someone else that told me that there was discussion of preserving it, but they didn't want to do that. Do you remember anything about that, Woody?
No, I don't recall that. I don't think I haven't had a conversation with the Salvation Army on what their plans are for the site. But it's small. It's a smaller footprint than Edgewood for sure. But it's in a very narrow sort of streetscape with a scolta, and it's just very tight. But I'm curious if anybody has a contact at the Salvation Army about any issues they might be facing, such as the Edgewood people, and any plans they might be exploring. I'm not aware of any.
That's true. We actually the Pine Lake Park Neighborhood Association had a gentleman from the Salvation Army come out and give a talk about the history of the lodge. And I don't believe that's where I heard that information that I asked you about, but maybe we could reach out to them, David or Kathy. Maybe he would know who we could talk to about it.
I don't have any contacts there, but one of our board members does.
Okay.
So we could ask him.
We could reach out just to get a feel, because like if we hadn't talked to Lynn tonight, we probably wouldn't have known, Lynn and Greg, that all that, what they were going through also. So yeah.
It's just another site that could easily be targeted because
Yes.
it has a large footprint.
Yes.
It's still operational.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And if you ever are in this area, I would highly recommend you go by it, because it's actually a very beautiful building and a beautiful site. And I've also put links to the history of it for everybody to look at if they'd like to.
I was telling Natalie earlier that pre-pandemic, I think in March of 2020, we were supposed to, W&P was supposed to go in and like have tea with everyone there and sort of get a tour of the building and chat with them about their history. So they're very nice folks. Pardon me, I don't remember our contact name, but I can try to search through my email for that. They were super nice folks, very much wanted to share what the building was, very aware that the building was special and wanted to show it off. So that encourages me.
Yeah, between you and David or whoever the board member is, we can definitely come up with somebody to talk to.
It would be John Wong.
Oh, is it John? Okay.
Yeah. I know that they have a spring festival every year too, and the doors are open, and you could go in and look around. You can't go into the rooms upstairs or women staying up there, but you could see the rest of the building.
Yeah, like a rummage sale or something, right?
Yeah.
They used to have an event at the holidays too. That was like a craft sale or something, and that was open to the public. So I don't know if they'll be continuing that post-pandemic.
Yeah, I've never seen that, but that would be pretty neat. Okay, does anybody have anything else they'd like to add to the Pinehurst Lodge or Edgewood? Okay.
Natalie, I would just ask maybe if you could clarify why we're talking about these two properties, just
sure.
Just once more.
To round it up, yeah, it kind of just went in from one thing to another. So the reason why we specifically are looking at these properties is because they are large parcels that would be attractive to developers and or the city. And they are right in our neighborhood, and we want to try to preserve them. They are I don't know, instrumental to the neighborhood at this point. So
I think they have a unique history, and
Yes.
also the architecture is so unique as well.
Yes, exactly. So that's why we've highlighted these two properties in particular. And also because like Eileen said, they are privately owned, which, you know, represents a different process than the Trocadero Roadhouse did, which is publicly owned. So what we need to do is we need to come together and decide, you know, what avenues that we would like to take with respect to those two properties, and also the avenues we'd like to take about the Caravel Police Station and also the library. I'm not really sure, you know, this was an informational meeting, so we're gonna have to figure that out somehow. But it might be advantageous to start with the footprint that's already been made by Eileen with respect to the police station and the library, and then possibly start researching the privately owned parcels.
Yeah, if I may.
Okay, Woody? Woody, apparently you were in touch with Marcel Boudreau at the planning department, that even though the Parkside Library started up again and it sort of stopped again, that it was supposed to be coming before the Historic Preservation Commission in the spring. Is that still on track? Because the HPC has been given a heads up. So, or has it been delayed again? Do you know?
Woody had to go.
Yeah, Woody had to drop off, but we have talked about that a little bit. And as far as we know, that is still on track for the spring. We don't know the exact, you know, an exact date, but that's what we know. Yeah.
So perhaps we can get the dates down and, you know, report back to everybody that's on this meeting so that they can participate if they'd like to.
Yeah, Natalie, if I can.
Because
Go ahead, Eileen.
Because I kind of like to just check it off the list, because there's some other areas. There's some houses out in this area that's called the Russo Tract. The Russo built the very kind of, you know, they have kind of a French flair to them. Now, at one time, Shannon Ferguson, who is still with the planning department, was working on this. She got taken off planning to go to be on COVID, that the kind of emergency. I'm not sure if she's back with planning. She's very nice. We had a meeting, Speak had a meeting, and some of the people showed up. It has to be, basically, they are all together. The owners would have to agree to this. At least at one point, the owners were not willing to agree with this. Shannon and I guess the planning department were saying it's a possibility to circle back again, because I don't know if people are familiar with the ones I'm talking about. They're fairly kind of the facade is fairly ornate. So, but that is a possibility. But I think, you know, taking care of the low-hanging fruit would give us a track record, and that would, I think, encourage others to want to participate. But to put that kind of on the back burner and maybe look at the library and the police station along with the Edgewood and Pinehurst Lodge, but that the Russo Tract actually, the planning department put a fair amount of work into it already. So it's not as though we would be starting from scratch. Thank you.
In that area, Eileen, it's about 35th and Lawton and kind of going towards Sunset. It's probably 6 or so blocks, something like that, 6 to 8. They're sort of the exception to the Dolgers in that area.
Yeah, I agree with Eileen about, you know, the low-hanging fruit. and also incorporating the private entities of Edgewood and Pinehurst. So we will have to, outside of the meeting, try to contact the owners who might have a different take on historic preservation than, say, the single family dwellings, especially if they're going through you know, situations where they could be getting funding if they did were nominated for historic preservation.
So that's actually right around the corner from my house. I'm in the dreaded Dolger. My apologies.
Me too.
But I think if I may, Natalie, or if I remember from when we kind of selected the Trocadero as our first Parkside Heritage, we sort of threw it out to the group of what do we want to do? And you don't have to make that decision right now, right? We can kind of leave this meeting and we'll have a follow-up from Natalie, and we can sort of percolate on what we want our priorities to be. And I totally agree that getting the low-hanging fruit and a track record, we've already got the Trocadero, and then continuing to build on that, we'll just get more folks to help participate in this. And Natalie, maybe this is a good time for you to kind of workshop what we want this committee to be moving forward, what Parkside Heritage is, moving one step further away from heritage, but of course, working in tandem with San Francisco Heritage.
Yes, correct. Because it's all new, it's a little jumbled. The process is a little jumbled, and that needs to be ironed out, but we're working on it. So that's the good news. I also just wanted, we've come together and we've decided that Parkside Heritage needed to have a working committee. And these are the bullet points of what we see this working committee accomplishing. And I'm sure there will be things added to it as time goes on. But we decided, Nicole and Evan and Eileen and myself decided that the working committee should have an odd number. So if there was ever any stalemate, there'd be somebody to break that stalemate. And the four of us are going to be on the working committee, and we are looking for somebody in the Parkside community to be the fifth person that has an interest in working with us to bring this forth to the neighborhood. So if you have any interest of that and would like to volunteer your time and work with us, I would greatly appreciate you emailing me at the Blues Girl Gmail account and letting me know. Does anybody have any questions about our working committee?
There may be some people, Natalie, who can't see the slide. I wonder if it might be a good idea to read the bullet points.
Oh, sure, I'll read it. It's also in the agenda, but just in case.
Oh, okay. I didn't notice that. If it's in the agenda.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll read it. That's fine. So the points that we felt were important for the working committee to be involved in are research historic landmarks and provide context to the Parkside neighborhood. And that is what we were just talking about. Attend planning meetings hosted by other groups to stay informed on historic preservation and development or redevelopment in surrounding neighborhoods. Plan and host community outreach, hosting meetings, marketing, etc. And to synthesize Parkside community feedback and present findings to San Francisco Heritage so that they can prioritize preservation efforts and focus on historic preservation legislation was also what we just spoke about. And I thought Woody had a very good point of, trying to discuss or be made aware of legislation that's out there with respect to development and historic preservation. So we'll have to look into that for the next meeting.
And if I may clarify, Heritage is the advocacy lead on this. That's not what Western Neighborhoods Project does. We're a community history nonprofit focused on the West Side for folks who don't know. So we're here to fully support with Zoom logistics and marketing and research and as community stakeholders here with a wide reach. I'm not great at standing up in front of district supervisor and lobbying our case. That's not my strong suit. That's all Carrie and Woody. So, making this a collaborative and open and transparent process, but understanding that not everyone who wants to come to these meetings and be informed wants to be part of the nitty gritty and working committee. So that's where we're sort of just making we're distinguishing between the two.
Exactly. Thank you. Very well put.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. And just want to, as Eileen said, that this is all very new. And this is really, I just want to say it's really exciting for us and for Heritage that this is, exactly what, we envisioned when we started Heritage in the neighborhoods. It's really, we know that there are people that love and care about their neighborhoods, and that they don't necessarily always come together and know each other. So it's just about bringing together the people that are already out there that care about historic preservation in their neighborhood. And so we're happy to have kick-started this group, but kind of letting folks just make of it like as they will, and is exciting for us. And so I just wanted to thank, Eileen and Nicole and Evan and Eileen and everyone for putting this together. And like Nicole said, we're all advocacy here at Heritage. So of course, we're going to support the working group, and kind of whatever the group decides moving forward, we'll try to support as best as we can. So yeah, just wanted to say that. Thank you.
We really appreciate everything you and Woody have done, Carrie. A lot. Well, does anybody have any questions or any comments that you'd like to make or anything before we say good night?
Well, I first of all, you've done a great job, Natalie, whipping this into shape. And
I'm trying.
And the thought I had is that I think it's great that the Edgewood people participated, and that they're kind of engaging with us, and maybe we could have a little input into what happens there, and maybe they can use Heritage as a resource as well for if there are any solutions.
Yes, I agree. That was unexpected, so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, so that was exciting. And so, Woody and I will reach out to them, because it sounds like they're already exploring some kind of historic designation. And so whatever information, we could share with them about the details, and we'll do that. And then we can report back and share that.
That'd be great. Anybody else before we head out for the evening? Heather, go ahead.
Hi, greetings. I'm a Parkside resident over by the reservoir, and new back to the city after being gone for 20 years with the Park Service in DC. But and just enjoying everything about San Francisco, and been stalking SF Heritage on Facebook, and so excited about what you do. I saw an opportunity to come and learn more about what you did, but also share something that our church is involved in through Faith in Action, which is now bringing forward a housing vacancy tax proposal. I don't know if you noticed that, but I saw some sort of, interest overlap. And I'll just put a link to an article from the Post. From the Chronicle. But the idea is that there are 40,000 homes in the city that are vacant. They're not, some for various reasons that would be exempt under this proposal, but others that a tax that would increase each year would be incentivizing owners to put them back into housing use, or otherwise pay a tax that would go towards developing affordable housing. But this is a way to create more housing without mega structures. And I think I heard a lot of discussion about that at the last Faith in Action meeting, that, building and building and building isn't the way to get more affordable housing. And I think it's also antithetical to neighborhood preservation. So I just wanted to come share that. And then I've taken down a couple names, and maybe you could come talk to Ford, maybe there would be an opportunity for exchange of information. But this is a petition that's now seeking signatures.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Anderson, you had your hand up.
Oh, hi. No, just wanted to celebrate that tax proposal. I think that's really awesome that, for those whose homes are vacant, that, we should tax them so that we could create more housing for others and preserve these lovely buildings.
Thank you for that. Anybody else have anything to say before we close? All right, well, thank you all for coming and for having patience as we muddle through procedures and how to best confront them. And we will be in touch about further meetings after we've gathered information. And other than that, have a great night. Again, if there's anyone interested in participating on the committee, please, contact me. And other than that, have a great evening, and thanks again for coming.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thanks, Natalie.
I'm going to stop recording now.